YouTube, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel. So today, guys, we're doing tier list. So it's been a while since we did tier list for this channel. I think for the past two selection packs. I'm not really too sure, but yeah, I'm just a bit busy at the moment. Anywho's, so tier list. I think we still have encountered the clear world or the selection pack for the clear world, the red eyes or the metal morph deck that came by. And I think there was also the Performage that came along as well. So we're gonna tackle it, of course. Oh no, we Goblin Bikers, of course. We will never forget Goblin Bikers. So for our tier list here, oh, by the way, so this is actually post 3 selection packs. So the month of March, 2 selection packs there, and then for the second week of April selection pack, which is the Primites, the Memento, and that one other archetype. But anyways, yes. That's the 3 selection packs overall. So the tier list. Our tier list is composed of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 decks that are experimental, rogue, and your typical decks that are, or archetypes that are worthwhile if you're gonna play it as an engine only. So without further ado, let's start off this tier list. So this is gonna be quite a while because it's gonna be a lot. So yeah. Oh yeah, the Emancipators. I forgot the Emancipators to add Emancipators. All right, there we go. We added Emancipators. All right, there we go. So, yeah, let's start off this tier list. Starting off with Dinomorpheus. Now, I do think Dinomorpheus has a little bit of a potential for this meta because we're going up against high beatdown decks that are very useful against the current format that we're in. But I would say they're pretty much rogue in my sense. Problem with this deck is they cut off a lot of life points. Although it really works well with Dinomorpheus, but you know, one burn and that's all it takes, and you'll just basically lose at that point. Plus, it's easy enough to remove your monsters with not even using any monster effects whatsoever. So Dinomorpheus is pretty much rogue in my own opinion. Chimeras, I would say, are pretty much tier 3. Although I've been working with this deck for a couple of months now, grinding myself to masters. Whether you're using this with Azaminas or the Patchwork engine, it's still pretty much a tier 3 deck. Very easy to grind to 5 or master 5 if you wanted to have fun with a deck that doesn't really rely mostly with meta decks. So this is one of the decks so far that can actually go to that type of scenario. So pretty good for Chimeras, tier 3 in my own opinion. Dragonlings. So Dragonlings for the couple of months, we got a buttload of supports in the form of, recently we got the Blue Eyes. I think Primites has some potential with it. I'm still looking into some decks that actually use Primites into. I think it goes down into the Metal Morph deck that has great potential with this deck for additional negation. I do think that the power level for this is very high, and the knowledge level for this deck is too high as well. But as long as you summon the Boral End Dragon to the field, you're pretty much winning at this point on. So that is tier 3 for Dragonlings. Branded is pretty much tier 2 decks. Whether you're using a 40, 50, or 60 card deck, it's very consistent. So pretty much a tier 2 deck. Then we have Clear World. I do think that the Clear World deck needs a bit more experimentation, not just for a stun variant. I have seen some builds for this deck that people are running this with stun only, so I'm just gonna put that one as experimental. Then we have Azamina. Azamina White Forest is one of the best decks so far that you can actually play with White Forest or even Chimeras, which is pretty nice. So I'm gonna put this one on tier 3. Then we have Bestials. Now Bestials are I think the only one limited at this point on is Magnemite, which is not really that bad, but I think I've seen some builds where people are using Finsmith with it. But nevertheless, it is just basically an engine in some or in most decks, but a very good engine nowadays because we're going up against Finsmith, the Blue Eyes. Coolest thing that you can actually add into your deck as one minor engine to counter monsters from the graveyard from ever summoning to the field. Centurions, pretty good tier 2 deck, especially that we got recently supports for Centurion. So the level 8 monster is pretty neat. The 2 level 4s that can also allows you to draw 1 card, and the 1 card that can change your opponent's effect to put a Centurion monster from your deck to your side of the field. Is also a pretty good card effect as well. So that's Centurions. Then we have Dark Worlds. I have played this one during the Duel Triangle. It was very fun playing this as a pure version, or not a pure version, playing this with Dangers. And I think that's the only way of playing Dark Worlds at this point on. But nevertheless, they're pretty much rogue. Then Blue Eyes, the next best thing. I have never thought that I'd reach Master 1, and with Blue Eyes, none of the less. Then we have Live Twins. I think Live Twins with the version of Greensmith is a bit better. But in my own opinion, it's still pretty much rogue, I would say. Then we have the Exodias. So Exodias, I would say, is a pretty good tier 3 deck. Especially if you're gonna play this one as a stun variant. I think this works well as well with, is it here? I'm looking for Horus. There we go. Horus stun and Kashtira stun as well. I'm gonna put that one as tier 3 as well. So that is, or no, you know what? I'm gonna put that one on tier 2. I think this is way better, to be honest. Even though this is a stun variant and these other cards are, you know, works the same way as a stun variant, but I think Exodia is way better. Fire Kings, I think they're pretty much tier 2 at this point on, even though people are not really using them. Snake Eyes are still a pretty good deck to pair with Fire Kings, and it is still very strong in the current format that are in. Endymions, I would say they are pretty rogue. Why am I still putting Floowandereys here? But no, typically just put this on rogue, even beneath Grapha there. Then White Forest, I forgot to place this one. So White Forest as Aminas is also tier 3. Exo Sisters, so we got the supports for Exo Sisters in the form of Tachyon. So it's easy enough to gain access to Martha now, or yeah, because of that card. It's very broken, to be honest. When I've seen the amount of cards that you can actually gain by the Tachyon card, it's quite insane. Nevertheless, it's still practically rogue in my own opinion. It's just a bit more consistent nowadays in gaining your cards, but nevertheless, it's still practically rogue. Then we have Gimmick Puppet. Honestly, guys, don't play this at the current format that we're in. Fiendsmith, pretty good engine, hands down. Still a pretty nasty engine, to be honest. Then we have here one of my favorite decks so far, Goblin Bikers. So Goblin Bikers, I would say they're pretty much rogue. Although I've seen some people run this one as an engine, never thought that it would be an engine. But seeing that one from the Memento standpoint, it is quite helpful, to be honest. So, but overall, as a main deck or a pure version, it is practically rogue. Then Labyrinth. Labyrinth is very powerful, especially that they can access the super factorial thingy trap card that can banish everything on your opponent's side of the field, which is very disgusting in my own point of view, but very formidable. So Labyrinth is still a pretty strong archetype on tier 1. Then Medalches. I haven't seen Medalches for quite some time, but I've seen them as another good rogue deck. Medalche has a really high ceiling just to gain access to like removals, bounce effects, and within that point on, I think you're still going to interact with hand traps or counter hand traps for that matter, or if you're going second, you're still going to counter that. Nevertheless, it's still very powerful as a mid combo deck type of thing. Then we have Ice Barriers. I think Ice Barriers needs a good engine for this matter, but even so, I think they're one of the strongest decks so far that they can actually gain you a proper advantage on going first if you are uninterrupted. The Ice Barriers has really wacky card effects that you can't attack, you can't use card effects if you don't discard, things like that. So very insane for this type of deck. Heroes, I would say it's still practically a tier 3 deck, but as long as you know how to play this deck, that's your main criteria for heroes. Mathemax, pretty good tier 2 deck in my own opinion. 3 copies of Silent Mining was a bit useful for this deck, and as long as, like I said, Circular is on 3 copies, it is still pretty good as tier 2. Melodious, pretty good rogue deck in my own opinion. Another good deck as well that has good protection from targeted effects, destruction protection, and even battle protection. So, and also they have removal from graveyard, and they can bounce cards to the deck with the help of their boss monster. Oh yeah, Magical Musketeers. Really good tier 2 deck, especially if you're gonna pair this one with the Fiendsmith engine. They really synergize quite well. Perform Age. Perform Age, I think, got some good supports. I think it needs a bit more experimentation, I would say. Primite's still a pretty good engine, I would say. Not main deck. I haven't seen like a main deck for Primites, to be honest, because I think their boss monster is even played on one copy on a pure version, so not really too sure about this one as a main deck. Then we have Metal Morph. Metal Morph, I would say, is a pretty good rogue deck, but in some scenarios you can place this one as an engine, especially with Dragon Links, another form of Dragon Link support, which is an additional negation, which is nice. So we'll put that one there as an engine. Oh yeah, here we go. Memento. Basically tier 1. Now, if you know how to play this deck, you're basically winning in most of your games, to be honest. The new supports got it more interaction. Your opponent dumps a copy of Maxi or Molcharmies. You get hand trap, you get rolled. There are a couple of lines you need to understand with this deck to work your way with it. Then Pendulum Monsters or Pendulum Magicians going for tier 3, like always. I think Purity's got their supports with the Lily. I think Lily was on 3 copies now. Nevertheless, I think they're still practically rogue. Naturias, I think this is pretty good with another variant. Naturia or Runic, both are rogues. I think that's understandable. Unless you're gonna pair this one with another archetype like Horus. What else? Centurions, I guess. So that's another good variant as well that you can play this one out. Ikanga's still pretty good as... yeah, tier 3. Still pretty good as tier 3 deck. I'm gonna put this one... where's the Infernoble? I forgot to put Infernoble. Yeah. How do you know? Forgot Infernoble in this crazy tier list. I think it's way better than... yeah, I think that's way better. Yeah, okay, so let's put that one there. Sky Strikers, I think the best way to play this is with a Tenpai. And yeah, that's basically it. But overall, if you're gonna play this as a pure version, it's typically rogue. Sharks! Sharks are pretty good on tier 2. No, wait. Not much that you can do with this deck, to be honest. If you're going second, you can still do an OTK properly. If your opponent knows how this deck works, then you're pretty much in danger. So we're gonna put this one on tier 3 as one of the good decks nowadays that you can play. Salamangreat's pretty good as rogue deck. I think that's way better than most of the decks here. Right here. I think that's the best slot for Salamangreat's. Ritual Beast, yes, and a pretty good tier 2 deck. Even though that shifter is on 1 copy, and as long as you know how to play this deck, you're pretty much sorted out. I think this is way better than Mathmex, I would say. So that is Ritual Beast. Rescue Ace, pretty good tier 3 deck. Maybe around here. Yeah, doesn't really special summon that much as well. And yeah, you're just gonna depend too much with your back rows as any Rescue Ace might have. Red Hot Dragon Archfiend, pretty much rogue at this point on, but needs a good pilot as well, even though if you're gonna pair that one with rogue. Same as Scareclaw, understandable. Rika, let's be honest, Rika has a pretty high ceiling. The main problem with Rikas nowadays is extra deck slots. That's it. Tier Elements. I would say Tier Elements is pretty much tier 1 in my own opinion. Why? Because newer supports with the Fiendsmith gains them access to the Reaper. Pilgrim Reaper. So this card is one of the best supports for Tier Element Fiendsmith. So you just need 2 level 6 monsters for this one. You detach 1 exit material from this card. Each player sends the top 5 cards from your deck to the graveyard. And that's it. You don't need a level 8. Just Fiendsmith engine or a package. Dump 5. If you hit one of the tier elements, that's all for you. So yeah, very insane deck. Very insane deck nowadays, especially with the Fiendsmith. There's a lot you can do with the Fiendsmith, guys. Come on. That's one of the best engines that they actually made so far. Then Sword Soul, pretty much rogue, I think around these parts right here. Tenpai, still a pretty good tier 3 deck in my own opinion. I think they haven't really removed, or they haven't actually moved from the slot at this point on. I think last month they were actually on tier 2. because of their ability to gain access to their cards, even though the majority of their arsenal are on semi-limit. Trap Tricks. Why am I still using Trap Tricks here? The Pretty Rogue, Snake Eyes, one of the best decks so far, even though that Fiendsmith is not anymore it's still applicable for them, but you know, it's not Beatrice type of feel. So I'm gonna put this one on tier 2, maybe around these parts here. That's still pretty good, above branded in my own opinion. Stun decks for, or stun, your typical stun is on tier 3. I'm gonna put this one here. And next to Horus and Kashtir Stun, Thunder Dragons, tier 3 deck if you know how to play this one. And this is one of the decks that actually uses Vicious as one of the formidable engines up against the format that we're in. So Thunder Dragon is the best way to go. Tachyon, I would say, is pretty good on tier 3. There are some builds that you can actually work with this one other than the Galaxy Eyes. No, I think Galaxy Eyes is the best way to play this deck, to be honest. Plus, their trap card is quite insane. Then Sprites, I would say Sprites is a bit experimental, in my own opinion. I think there's still a bit more that this deck needs. Other than what was recently added to the game. I think Swap Frog was on 3 copies now, right? But nevertheless, I think it's still in that point that needs a bit more experimentation for it to thrive in this format that we are in. So I'm gonna put Sprite there. Yubel, the next best thing. Honestly, it's still pretty good on tier 1. I'm gonna put that one there. There, that's much understandable. So that's Yubel. Then Unchained, pretty good tier 3 deck. Voiceless Voice, pretty good tier 3 still. Then Vanquish Soul. So I'm gonna put this one here. I think that's way understandable as a rogue deck. Nevertheless, I'm hoping that we'll get those cards in the near future for Vanquish Soul. So fingers crossed. ABC XYZ, damn it, man, just remove this. I hate playing this deck. This deck is one of the reasons I hated playing Master Duel that time. So put that one in Rogue. There's a lot of bricks for this deck. If you're planning on running 2 copies of each of the ABC XYZ, you're bound to lose, honestly, and you deserve to lose. This deck is so bricky, my gosh. Adamantimators. Adamantimators, I would say, still pretty rogue, but I think the best version for this is with the Vernisil. Because they have another variant where they can use the drought to their advantage in gaining access to the drought from the deck to the graveyard and the graveyard to the field, which of course your opponent is bound to summon only earth monsters, which is kind of neat. So that is everything else for the tier list, boys and girls. What are your thoughts on the tier list? And did I miss anything? If so, tell me in the comment section below. I'll see you guys in the next video. Keep safe, good luck. If you like this kind of content, like and subscribe. See you guys later. Goodbye. Oh yeah,